And welcome into today's roundtable. Lots of issues we're going to try and get today on the maritime sector. Starting off with Russian oil and the fact that the price cap has started to be enforced. What's going to be the result of that? Also, what's going to be the impact of the dark fleet that may have an impact, a severe one, on this as well. Joining us is Dr. Sal Mercogliano, and he is joining us here from Blue East Creek, North Carolina, and also Lauren Beagen, the maritime professor, joining us from Boston, Massachusetts. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. Sal, I'm going to throw this first one at you. You did a video about this on your channel, what's going on with shipping, but just kind of in a nutshell, how much of an impact is the dark fleet going to have on this Russian oil price cap?
Well, I mean, the big thing we're seeing right now, Bill, is the beginning of a crackdown. The U.S. State Department sanctioned 2 tankers for the illegal carriage of Russian oil that's above the price cap. I think what we're really seeing is the difficulty that this type of measure by the G7 for regulation. Again, what they're trying to do is prevent the shipping of oil above a certain price cap, and the mechanism they're using is insurance companies. They're trying to get the P&I clubs not to insure these vessels. And the problem we're seeing is that when the oil goes over the price cap, these ships are jumping over to other P&I clubs. These are non-traditional ones that don't cover 95% of the world's cargo. And what we're worried about is a proliferation of that. Will we see more and more of that happening as oil stays above the $60 per barrel limit set by the G7 and the EU?
Lauren, as you look at this situation from your perspective, obviously there's lots of different details and issues that could go awry here as well. What are you seeing when you look at this particular issue in terms of what kind of impact this is going to have on shipping as a whole?
A major concern. I mean, so if this price cap were to be actually fully enforced, and as it's starting to be, I think we're going to have some trouble on oil being sent around to the world. You know, Russia is a major supplier of the world's oil. And so, having the shadow fleets that we've seen and talked about at length here on the show is kind of a unique thing happening where they might show up and then they might switch the fuel to a different vessel. And so now it's kind of hidden, right? It becomes one part of that shadow fleet. I think this is something that we will continue to monitor and continue to watch, but this enforcement piece is going to be an interesting dynamic to watch as this all unfolds.
Certainly is, and certainly from a legal perspective there as well. All right, let's jump a little bit here into Europe and talking about the European Union Block Exemption repeal. This is something that came across, of course, that they used to allow alliances, and now we have repeal of that, Sal. Now, not too long ago, we had 2 big carriers decide they were going to split ways, but what does this do for the rest of those 12 carriers in terms of working together and forming these alliances?
Well, what the EU has done is they've said that they're not going to provide the antitrust exemption anymore. So it doesn't really break up the alliances yet. There would have to be cases filed against them, but it removes a key provision that protects them next year. And so I think one of the things that this does is gives the impetus to see a reshuffling right now of the alliances. We knew this was going to happen with the breakup of the 2M alliance, with MSC and Maersk announcing that they were going to sever their alliance, which was the biggest alliance out there. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to see a reshuffling about that. And, it can go one of 2 ways, I think, in many ways. We can see a whole new reshuffling of the stack, new alliances coming in place, or the alliance system as we know it goes away. And that's going to put companies at each other's throats in some ways in a depressed freight market, which means that we could potentially see a repeat of Hanjin bankruptcy, or worse, we're going to see some essential services not provided anymore to ports and countries around the world because of this breakup of this alliance. So I'm not sure how this plays out. I know there are a lot of people clapping about it and happy about it, but I think the unknown is riskier than what we're going to get.
Lauren, this is obviously a very interesting issue there as well. But in terms of how this works out going forward, it would seem that, well, first off, looking back, obviously the alliances created and those that were in existence during the pandemic just made boatloads of money, no pun intended, through that particular time. Now breaking up, this seems like a very interesting move, not breaking up necessarily, but at least giving the impression that they need to be broken up, puts an interesting spin on how things are going to move forward.
Sure. So alliances, I think, have gotten a bad rap, right? I mean, the billions of dollars that were received and kind of enjoyed by the ocean carriers were no more surprising than to the ocean carriers themselves. There's many years that ocean carriers were putting up losses for the year. And so while many people entered the industry seeing these billions of dollars, they may not have been around for, like Dr. Mercogliano was talking about, Hanjin going bankrupt. And so what we see is if these alliances start to reshuffle, or if these alliances start to also dissipate. So the next alliance that we might see a potential dissolution of is in 2027. And then the third alliance that we might see is 2030. That's when their expiration dates are permitted. If we start to see the other alliances going away, we know what alliances look like. If alliances go away, we might start to see mergers and acquisitions. And really, that becomes true monopolies, right? Or potentially has the potential for. So instead of just vessel sharing in only operation, not rate, we could potentially see companies buying up other companies. And that could provide a lot more trouble for the industry in general, because alliances, as we know, provide great routing. They provide better pricing in theory. They really do provide more opportunity, because instead of two vessels, competing vessels going on the same route, alliances provide the opportunity for two companies to be filling cargo that they've competed for on one vessel, while the other one is available to go to other ports. And so that might be some of the more medium to small ports. If these alliances go away, potentially, we're not saying that they will, then you might see those small to medium ports not enjoy the benefit of the alliance and have those vessels come service them.
Lauren, can we come back to you, and I'll get the same question here to Sal. How precarious do you think this situation is? Granted, in a lot of situations you say, well, this is probably what's going to happen. Do we really not have a clue as to how this could play itself out over the course of those next, say, 4 years up to 2027? Lauren? I think we've lost Lauren.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't think that we're totally in the dark here. I don't think much is going to happen right now. So 2M is dissolving. What I do think that we are going to see, like Sal said, is the potential for a reshuffling. I don't think we're going to see dissolution of the other alliances just yet.
Sal, how precarious is the situation, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting it came from the European Union side. I would expect this from the U.S. side more than that. I think they're trying to get ahead of this. And I do think we're going to see a reshuffling first. The question is going to be is the number of cases that start being filed up against them. We're seeing already increased filings in the FMC against the carriers. And if this starts going, I think Lauren is exactly right. What you would see is the creation of even larger container firms with mergers and acquisitions. And that is not exactly what we want to see.
All right, let's move on to our final topic. We've just got a couple of minutes left here. Lauren, we'll flip it back to you. And the St. Lawrence Seaway during a strike, or is seeing a strike right now, which basically isolates the Great Lakes. First off, what happened here, and is this serious?
So we've been seeing the rise of the employee. I talked about it a bunch. During COVID, we saw a lot of the essential employees required to still be in person. And at the time, it felt like they were risking their lives. And so now we're starting to see the outfall, I feel, from that, where the unions are saying, look, we've been here. We never got the sent home break that administrative employees or non-essential employees did. And remember, during COVID, at the very beginning, at least in the U.S., maritime workers were not included in the essential employees list on a national level. So this is up in Canada, but it certainly affects the U.S. through the Great Lakes. This is the St. Lawrence Seaway. So we don't have any vessels that are stuck inside the Great Lakes right now, but we do have about 100 vessels that are on the outside trying to get in. I think that this could potentially have major impacts. There's a lot of goods that go through the Great Lakes, through the specialized Laker fleet. But I think, with the rise of the employee and they're trying to rebalance, I think a lot of these agreements are going to come down to kind of an appreciation for the life-threatening work that they were doing during the beginning of COVID, or that's what it felt like at the time.
It seems like, Sal, this is a bit of a similar situation, correct me if I'm wrong, with Istanbul over in Turkey with the Black Sea, in terms of it's got a control of a very small strait of water. And, of course, St. Lawrence Seaway, the only way in and out to, of course, the interior portions, certainly Chicago, in the interior portions of the United States. How serious is this?
It is. I mean, you're preventing the exit of seagoing vessels, what are referred to as salties, up on the Great Lakes, and so you do have ships piling up at the Welland Canal, which connects Erie to Ontario, and along Montreal and Quebec to try to get in. Remember, you have a narrow window here because mid-December you shut the Seaway down because of ice. So you have ships that are coming out. You've got the next round of ships coming in, and if you cannot cycle these vessels through to deliver things like rock salt, if you can't get the soybeans out and now the corn that's being harvested out, that's going to be a problem because again, there's not a lot of alternatives to the St. Lawrence Seaway to get goods out. We saw this when all of a sudden the Fraser River flooded last year and you couldn't get goods out to the west coast of Canada. We saw it with the ILWU strike that happened on the Canadian ports on the west side. This is critical. We're really seeing a potential backlash in terms of the supply chain with this shutdown, and it's going to get worse. We do not see them coming back to the table until Friday this week, and we even actually do have one ship that's stuck in the Great Lakes. The USS Marinette, which was a newly commissioned littoral combat ship, is stuck in Cleveland. It can't get through the Welland Canal and out to Mayport, Florida right now, so it may get stuck in the Great Lakes for the winter.
Things are definitely heating up on a lot of fronts in the maritime sector. Lauren Beagen, Sal Mercogliano, thanks so much for joining us for our roundtable today.
Thanks for having us, Bill.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short break and wrap up this edition of FreightWaves Now after this.